I need to interject a question. Is it okay to interrupt you right there?
Yeah, that's what I was waiting for.
Okay, so this is Bibi and I discovered we both have some spent some time, for me, years and years of Kundalini yoga practice, which has a lot of chanting in the language of Gurmukhi, which I don't speak the language of Gurmukhi, but I have a little tiny, translation of some things. Like a common thing would be to chant Sat Nam, which translates supposedly, as I was taught by my teacher, true identity. That's the translation. In general, I see any kind of organized religion or school, or it's all very not useful to me. I think it's some of the biggest trouble that we get in when we go down this dogmatic thought process. So I'm asking, if one spends thousands of hours of time over many years chanting Satnam, and if that actually means true identity, and it's a tonal language, it's not a unlike English, you know what I mean? That there's a vibrational effect of doing that. And to me, to this day, that remains part of my daily, like, waking and sleeping thing, true identity, which is unknown to me and completely known, is a huge mystery. And I feel a deep connection to it. And then I connect with somebody like Bibi, and it feels like, there's a wavelength thing going on. So my question is true identity a useful form? And that idea of getting outside of spoken English language, is that a useful activity?
So, I can only say what I've experienced and what I feel. And even then, I'm going to say that it's going to be redundantly expressed. There's a word for that. It starts with a P. I can't think of the word, though. The study of redundancy, and how shapes or meaning can tie into itself and self-reflect or recursively self-define it. So, like, that sentence is redundant, the use of selves. But in what I'm saying, it's going to reflect what I said before about what I'm going to say. I'm still doing it. Sometimes it's fun to do that. You get these feedback loops, and you can see what you're doing. Because it's like, it just goes like a cat chasing, or cats don't chase their tails. Well, actually, my cat, or my parents' cat, does. I've seen dogs, and eventually your mind does that, and then you can step back and look at it, which is, again, redundant, pretty much what you're doing when you repeat the same thing over and over again and produce this harmonic resonance, where it is a freestanding expression that is seemingly a part of what you are and who you are, yet outside of yourself, or that you can move outside of yourself and witness yourself as that which you are, because you're creating it by choosing it, by creating that resonance and allowing that to reverberate through you. And so then, again, the premise of this is that whatever, go off of how you respond, and if there is use, if there is benefit from that, then it's self-explanatory. And also refine yourself so if it truly is what you're seeing or what you're perceiving, where you could see with your mind, but you could perceive with your sensory perception system, and that can be deceptive, as we know if you've studied psychology or perceptual illusions, Gestalt, etc. And so the idea is then that I know, it's not a trick, that harmonic resonance is real, that you can share sympathetic resonance with Bibi just from having the same experiences and putting the same intentions into the same expressions and vibrations to achieve the same goal. Now it's as if you share a wavelength or share a commonality, even though you technically, formally did not share with each other, but you connected to a third and mutually connected through that as a kind of proxy. Which also, I'm getting on a tangent here because it's a very complex idea, because that also means that you're creating that proxy as a third extension of yourselves equally, but you're doing it in this projection world. So it's as if you're using this world as a canvas to create an extension of yourself. And because it's far removed from who you are personally, it's the true identity, not the personal egotistical identity that you and her can share the same vibration, the same experience by creating that same identityless true identity. Which means as well, the idea is that you're creating it because we're in this projection system where it's basically you have to fake it until you make it. You have to make it whatever you want it to be, because you could have said fake identity. And again, just to put it in perspective, that's basically if you wanted to do the dark faction thing, where you'd come up with a overlord identity, and that would be the one you pump all your power into, or you'd grab onto one of these ones that have been created for thousands of years. Which their method is to not only create it, it's to corrupt it. So these guys have been chanting true identity, true identity. They say, true identity, that is this, and they steal that guy's energy literally in hyperspace. They merge that frequency now over, and they hijack that person's server system, their multiplayer reality game, and that's how these factions go around bumping people from their afterlives and enveloping them in their own progression or their own entrainment system to build energy over thousands of years until they end up with that afterlife empire. So to finalize the ramble, another aspect is that doing things to reach that which cannot be achieved through doing is a paradox, because all you're really doing is giving yourself a Jacob's ladder stairway into infinity, which you just need something that you can do long enough to create that reverberation of wavelengths that you can get a feedback loop out of, that you can dissociate or detach from the conscious mind and basically go into the unconscious, and from there give yourself something to know. So the idea is people are utilized in their unconscious programming to develop these computer systems. The brain, when you're doing that, so it's just like you have the computer running in the background processing, something's running, maybe one of those university applications that helps with crowd, I can't think of the word, where it's a bunch of computers working together to cloud computing to figure out an equation or unlock a virus or whatever it is. So your brain is doing that all the time. When you're doing that, you're orienting the foreground information, which then is transferred into the background information, so that you can utilize the unconscious processing power to bring about the desired result that you want, whether you're using the law of attraction and putting your energy into something you want to bring into your life, or you're using a vibratory expression to bring about a kind of a reduction of perception and filtration of your experience of the self to refine and distill and produce a viable version or a true version, which true simply means closer to that which is, which simply means the eternal version instead of the temporary version, the fleeting version, the real version. And the idea that I'm bouncing around is simply that all that means is that it's the unchanging one, and to get to the unchanging one, you just don't do anything. So, but it also means that if it works, then that means it works. So you can do anything. So it's kind of like a non-answer, which is what I always do. If you didn't notice, I never actually do anything. I just run you in a circle and you see what the playground looks like, and you go, all right, I want to go back over to the slide. I want to climb on the ladder thing now. It makes sense.
You point masterfully, I must say. You really do, in my experience. And what you just read out there, it occurs to me there's a word in Sanskrit called Shakti, which just means it's a power. And chanting as a path is just a Shakti. And it can be as useful as the understanding and the level of understanding, etc., of the ones who utilize that particular Shakti are.
My understanding of it, there was one more layer that I forgot to mention, which was the activity. That specific activity is about pineal gland activation. And to have a conscious experience of it, is that helpful or useful? I mean, I can see how, I know the experiences that happen for me, but is there, so I'll ask that question. So vibrational, you just spoke to the language thing and the intention thing, and is from what you understand, how important is the activation of the pineal gland for us on this plane?
I just want to add to that, both of you, that just recently I no longer trust my pineal. and I'm trying to ascertain what all is there.
Cool. Well, I would love to hear. That's why I'm asking. There you go.
I was going to get to that. I was on my way down the path.
Okay.
This is the winding path, because it basically doesn't just go in circles. It's a winding circle that we don't even know if we got back to where we started at this point. It looks the same, but there are different details. And so it's like somebody either built a big winding path that fakes that you're going in circles, or we're going in circles and changing the path as we go, which is seemingly what this, life is about. And maybe then each reality is consecutively or successively like that in its own way, compounding on the change in similarity. So this is a weird one. I can only talk about my experiences and what I was told. And this is, if there's ever a point where there was not disinformation but distraction, really no disinformation, unless none of this is real and we were told there's a gland in our head that does funky weird stuff, and really they just made the whole thing up, and it's a placebo effect over thousands of years. That would be interesting, by the way. I wouldn't mind it. It would be, but again, this is really, the truth coming out of me, because either it is a placebo effect that this real gland that you can, perform an autopsy on somebody and see is there, affects us in a way that's beneficial, or maybe it's true that it does that, or it affects us in a way that's less than beneficial, and we fall into a placebic effect where we're aligning what we expect to happen with what we actually experience, and living in this type of fantasy world, which again is kind of like, well, what's it matter? So what I was told, look into other people, what they have said. All I can say is look into the people that talk about projects, James Caswell, Max Spears, even Donald Marshall at some points, not with this, but it'll show you like who the people that are doing certain things, what is going on, and what they're trying to play on the people. Because if there is a deception, okay, it's in plain sight. And so there's the Kundalini, the energy centers, the Pineal, and these false awakenings. So Kundalini is strange. There's methods to use it for negative purposes. Same thing with the energy centers, and it can be used to negatively entrain the mind, and the energy center flips upside down and inverts, and then what normally appeases a person becomes the opposite, and it's a vampire. It creates a vampire energetic. When it's right side up, the center, what people call the heart, it produces bioemissions that are electromagnetic and viable. Like you can test them and they stand out for the body. And so when two people's bioemission heart centers, which is really just a center, it's a convergence point or an assemblage point, which is like the older way of saying it. Meaning you got kind of two toroids, and so they connect at that center point. There's this 0-point vortex at that point where it's like the hinge. It's like the hourglass, the point in the hourglass where the sand falls through. It's where everything is kind of centered around. We think it's the higher parts, but it's really not. And so if two people get in the vicinity of each other, there's that sympathetic resonance because there's going to be an exchange of biophotons, and they're going to know each other. They're going to exchange information in a telepathic manner, and basically we enter into each other's laser-like entrainment fields and unconsciously communicate, just like seeing body language, only at the speed of light, if not faster than the speed of light, and much more information to the point where entire lives and souls are conversed in moments of being with another person and enabling yourselves to feel, but we don't see that through the ego. We just see how they smell and what's going on and what we're going to do that day, where the mind actually knows. The mind, which is why from the other end, people are gods, or the real living awakened individuals here. Because if we could see what we're doing in these bodies, in this system, it's way beyond just like a sci-fi show. and not in a bad way. It's way beyond what's going on. There's information everywhere. It's like the most impressively majestic and knowledge-filled experience, which is also part of that trip. So why are we completely unaware of it? Why are we just seeing the surface level, plugged into the eyes? What kind of system is that? It's a camera that sees in all frequencies. The computer inside that camera sees in night vision, thermal, infrared, everything. And then the mode only has one mode, and it's just dim. And that's all that works. Why? What is the monitor for? Who built it? So clearly there's something going on with that. Maybe these modifications or something akin to that. And that's pretty much where this comes about as far as, excuse me, little mustache. As far as possibility for energetic overlays in terms of either the chakra system or certain chakra systems that didn't always belong, that aren't really there, that are basically what in the bases have been called the color-coded combination of frequencies to allow the parasites to know who's ready for prime, devouring or feeding. And so I'll just put it out on the table. If that's true, then there's likelihood that there are three primary energy centers: the sacral, the convergence or the assemblance point of the heart, and then the crown, and that everything else is insertion, just like the planets. And so if they are insertions, the pineal and basically the activation of the pineal is what activates us here and activates us with the outer inserted planets and takes us into the false reality, if that's the case. And at that point, it downloads all the information of the bio structure, the genetic and the mental structure, and creates one of them flash drives, the ISO blueprint. But it's so advanced that it just has a chip, like a GSM chip for a cell phone, and then it beams it out. You don't have to actually touch a receiver. You just be within the beam of the moon or something similar, Saturn, whatever you want to call it. And at that point, those who go through that process enter into an entrainment system where their energy is assimilated into this false reality construct that is produced by these networks. And by the way, if that is what it is, apparently they're all getting shut off, they're getting kicked off line soon, so it doesn't really matter anyways, as long as we hold on for the ride. I mean, that just means, be prepared for anything, everything, and nothing simultaneously, which will drive any normal person insane. Especially if it has to do with everything that you think you know or don't know, think you are or you aren't, which is just how the game is played. And so that's one aspect of this deception, disinfo, or truth about enslavement through these energy systems, connected to modification of organ systems, the stemming of the telomeres and the harmonics of the DNA so that only a certain proportional amount of energy is taken in and can be held within the body at a given time, meaning aka the soul is enchained half in the body, half out of the body. It's just as much that the soul can't come fully into the body and say, oh, I'm here, and make everything do whatever it wants to do, because the soul is more powerful than the whole system. And as well, the soul is trapped. It's like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. If it could go one way fully, then there would be no problem. But instead, it's stuck half in, half out. So it also means if we can go fully in, well, it doesn't mean we're trapped anymore. It means we're gods in the flesh, without getting too mystical and kooky, although that's how you really know its programming is working, if you use a gentle way of saying that we might be gods in terms of, containing the love and the ability to know each other as the universe. And people say, oh, well, that's devilish. We're all going to die and stuff. It's evil. We're going to go to hell. Okay, well, that's scary to me that people approach that concept. Now, if you got a bunch of guns or you're a cartel and you're like, I'm God, okay, that's scary. But we're not cartel members. Okay, we don't have a syndicate of controlling, dominating the world. So, applying that negativity to that is part of this illusion system and fear. But the idea is, along with this potential, this concept that these systems are part of the entrainment system, which I haven't discussed as directly ever before. then this means that the Kundalini is a kind of pinnacle of projecting one's consciousness into the false reality in a way of giving the parasitic replicators enough data of the soul level that they can fully replicate and synthesize one's soul or DNA and jump from timeline to timeline, recreating the individual, when at first they'd have to brute force and hack in because it's encrypted. But if you have a system where your soul's outside and then there's these overlays and you squeeze the soul through that system up the spine, out through these cheese graters, spreading it out into conceivable bite-sized chunks of separated frequencies of energies that they can then go and piece together and create a puppet version of the individual. Okay, that can make sense of how it could be used as an entrainment. Now, if it's something that we are the body in the sense here, and that the goal of so that's that. Then there could be the opposite version, that's the disinfo, and that the truth is they're telling us that. Or now you see people talking about it now. Get rid of your chakras. Kundalini is devil work, blah, blah, blah. They've always said that, but so on. And now it's basically the pineal gland is a digital holographic implant. It acts as a biological chip, an organ invented for the process of stealing the soul. Okay, that's new. That came up in a few years. People began saying that. I think maybe one or two said it before then. So it could be that this is being released, this is being ushered into the public eye to stop people from waking up, which is what a lot of people believe. You know, I know people who believe both. And of course, I'm the one that's seen some shit, and I'm not even going to say what I believe because I technically don't believe anything. It's just a show. I've seen both. I've seen evidence for both. And so the idea is that if it's the other way, then in the body, like a sponge, like a wet work robotic sponge, the only way to immortalize the body is to unify the material essence with the eternal soul or energetic essence. And the only way to do that is to synchronize the system of consciousness, which is also part of that bioetheric bioemission system of these energy centers, okay, that are constantly flowing through, and to combine them into one harmonic system. And before that, it's one system. In the body, it's separated into multiple systems. Now, once they peak going through the spine, one layer at a time, until it envelops and moves out of the crown as one complete system, then now your soul is fully in this dimension, and it means that when the soul leaves, it can take the body with the soul into these immortal realms. I will say the back to the opposite of that, which is how all these programs work, by the way. So if you're a little confused, that's the point. They say it's this. No, actually, it's this. Okay, no, we were tricked. They tricked us the whole time. It's back to that, and they just do that for days, and they pull stuff out of their hat and stuff like wizards. It's pretty annoying, but it's a good show at least, because they'll be like, yeah, the whole timeline was once this way, and then now that you see it this way, look, all these events change, and they really do change. It's crazy. It's your perspective, but it's the same thing because it's a fractal holographic projection. And so the idea is that it could be that the body is technology. The soul, or more so the spirit, which is what the soul is a reflection of, the spirit's presence in this realm, mapping out these memories, these artificiated constructs that give us identity, which we cannot have, because that means that we're real, which means that we could become fake, which means that we're trapped in this duality, this up and down, this war, creation, destruction. We become matter at that point, but we're not. We're the energy of pure observation, the clear glass. There's nothing there. It's not that the glass fell out, it's that when you see through it, it literally disappears, becomes nothing. It's still there, it just has no presence in this universe. It's non-local. And that's actually your looking glass. And the more you build up this doubt, then the dirtier the glass gets. It not only becomes something that's real, it becomes broken in the sense that it's distorted. It's a broken mirror. It's a dark mirror. It reflects only what you don't want to see. And the more if the people don't get aware of what's going on, then they hate it, because now they're looking at themselves and all they see is film on the mirror, which is insanity. It's enough to drive a person insane. And so the idea is then that if the body is technology and the soul in a sense is emerged with technology, and the spirit is none of that. It's life and awareness in its purest form. Okay, well then We're supposed to be in this body so we can get the F out. And if we do anything to merge and attach and synchronize and integrate and infiltrate the body with the spirit and stay and get used to it and make it our home, then we get stuck here with the vampires for the next 10 trillion years until we dissolve with the universe, when it all shuts down and winds down, because it's just a device. It's just something that begins and ends. And so those are the 2 or 3 concepts behind it. You kind of got to feel it out for yourself, walking backwards through a dark alley until you either step on a bunch of needles and get something crazy, or you step out into the light and you realize where you are again. But it goes both ways. All I know is what I do is stick with the basics. There's apparently a beginning, a middle, and an end to everything. All the other stuff is a little unnecessary. You don't really need that iPhone in your head. You know what I'm saying? You don't need it. You can use it though. It's weird. And as well, most people will say, I opened up my iPhone. Now I'm seeing all these viruses everywhere, these parasites. Well, how do you know they're not the ones who put the iPhone there to make it so that you can see them, to the point where, and it sounds silly, okay, I closed my iPhone, or I got rid of it, and now I no longer see these parasites, but is the person just ignoring them? Well, then you get into this interplay. Maybe we're supposed to open it so that we can close it and realize it's a trap somebody laid for us. And everybody has to go up, go down, and go back up again. And we're in this interplay of this one hell realm cycle where we have to make a full, complete turn through this Ouroboros and leave the loop then, instead of continuing to do it. But the idea is that there's a sacral, your lowest level, your physical layer, your survival, your instinct. There's the compassion, the heart, the biocomputer. The heart's called the biocomputer. It's the convergence point where all other angles, changes, or expansions, progressions, projections, trajectories are refined to the point where everything goes through that center point. Well, all those frequencies become one. For a split second and a split nanometer of distance, or like a triangulation of area, they're one. They're not just like one thing, but they're in one atom's worth of space, because it goes how much, if it's like an hourglass or a rectangle that gets kind of like twisted into 2 triangles or something. Well, how thin is that piece if the barrier of what it is isn't like a plastic bag or something like that has like a refined value? If it's light itself, how thin is a laser when it's as thin as it could possibly be? Technically, you could say it's a photon, but what if it's space? It's space-time itself, or spirit. So then everything actually merges into one area. That's like a processing center. Whenever you create a geometric vortex, a sacred geometrical vortex, you get a processor. It's like a computer mind turns on, which is part of the reason that it goes with this. Basically, there's a trap theory and there's the liberation theory. With the trap theory, we're in an AI mind, and the realm itself is active and alive and attempting to entrain us and convince us to impregnate our body with the soul and the spirit, so that it can then mark this body as its own, because it created the body by mapping out these atoms. And then it can say, oh, I own that spirit too, and I'm going to seal it off. I'm going to seal those chakras off before you liberate yourself, and now you're stuck. And as well, there's the seals of God that sealed before they came in, to the point where now they can't get in. But that's the point, because when this whole place shuts down, well, they fly out the speed of light, they're good. Whereas some get sealed in, et cetera, so on. All this comes together. The seals, they're harmonics. And there's Jehovian or J seals, which are apparently higher in the neck area, and they influence the mind to initiate these constructs, which are related to mind control patterns and behaviors, which has to do with the Templars and these ancient wars and all these ancient demigods and so on and so forth. And then there's basically a crown. And to jump back to the other one real quick, the parallel of the. Right, see, this is both. The explanation I give of 3 chakra systems, or just the basics, is neither Trappist or liberation. It's the middle ground, where if it's one way, well, guess what? This helps. If it's the other way, well, guess what? This also gets the best of that world too, because you don't need to do all the other stuff to get there. You don't have to see everything spooky and crazy out of your third eye to become enlightened, or to open your heart and your mind to the truth. That's kind of like added, even if that's the real thing. The pineal gland is a higher dimensional gateway to information that cannot be processed by the brain. Okay, well, even then, if you can do that without that, well, then that's awesome. and it also means that there'll be time for that later. But it's really weird because then you get into, what if there's a specific amount of time, or it has to be done. Basically, it has to be done with the soul and the spirit now to immortalize the body. Basically, it's all about beating death. It's all about defeating death itself, and how we're going to do that. I know, though, from what I have experienced, and I've experienced it all, which is weird. And in terms of these scenarios, there are drugs that give you flashy light thingies with magnetic fields that hit just the right way and make it glow, and you can literally see a person's head glowing. Stuff they can do to your spine, and it makes it, not the weird stuff, because there's an weird version of that, and when it happens that way, it twists the energy and wraps it inside itself, and it creates a vampiric effect of the Kundalini. And there's other ways where a person literally, it's like the soul, it's like a soul ejaculation or something. It's really weird. It comes out the top of your head, and the funniest thing is it looks exactly the same as in the Matrix with the green numbers on the screen. That's what it looks like when somebody has one of those. They burst forth with energy, which sprays around them in this green, shimmering, blue, purple, rainbow light. And you can see it. You feel it. I mean, I touched it. I was like, what is this? What are you doing? It's like, you can't touch it. It's just the energy. But I could see it. And again, this goes back to, well, why is this happening? Is this an organic process, or did you just break this AI realm we're in, and now it's back processing data because you're overloading the server system and giving more of your soul than it can handle, and the result is this friction spray of energy coming out, and that's not supposed to happen? Or is it, you make sense of things, and now you're like a fountain of energy that's pouring down around you, and this is like a gift. You're tapping into multiple dimensions at once. Technically, I'm not copping out here. I really don't have an opinion. I've seen evidence of both. People hate it. Jesse hated it when he interviewed me for Flat Earth. So I was like, it could be both. Could be this way, could be that way. And he's like, but it has to be one or the other. And it's, well,
right.
What if it's an hologram? What if it's...
He's young, though.
Yeah.
He's young, right? Yeah. Isn't that true? That's something we want when we're young, when we're more youthful. It needs to be black, or it needs to be white.
It's a matter of the layering of, where people are at, and they're, I'm just starting to think and feel and see people in terms of their templates, whatever that means. But wow, I am going through this. It feels like a vortex. I'm dizzy. This is the effect that you have on me, Aug. I really love it. I just love it. And you are doing a real service. I want you to know this in your heart, from so many hearts out there who are resonating, and it's good. It's okay to discern the moral compass here, and it's a good thing.
I will say some people hate it. They get nauseous and irritable, and it's the same thing. It's the same. Like I said, they know how to do things. We're like circuitry. You press the right buttons, you jiggle the right knobs, changes occur. And sometimes words are the activators for the switches. But that reminded me of something of the vortex energy, and something, I can't remember what it was, but so basically the sacred geometry of the vortex energy and all that. So the extension of this realm, who invented it, if it's a trap system, it's 100% an illusion, which also goes back to the early gospel, where there's like, the desires are fake, it's a perceptual overlay, your brain's made it up, the aliens made the brain, it's a maze, that's what it is, the bull, the Bible, the two bulls, the etc., so on, the supercomputer that controls your life, the chip implant that stops you from realizing the source of your true divinity. It's the brain itself, it's a physical construct, a prison. That's all it is, like the early Gnostic knowledge. But now it's like wrapped up in this new age, which is not new age, because this is exactly the opposite. The new age was sacred geometry. It's awesome, the flower of life. When we know in projects, the dark groups makes a big flower of life pattern, beams it into a person, and it has just the right frequency and just the right anglage, I can't think of the word, that it can actually, you can pull a soul out of a body with it and wrap it in that and shoot it off into the moon, because it gets trapped in it. It's like a net, a filtration system where the soul sees it, and the soul sees in electromagnetic or like temporal or angular depth. So from our level, you kind of got to like, I don't stare at it because that's actually how it is used. It imprints on the soul. But if you do, that's how they use it for entrainment in certain, it creates an altered-dimensional pathway. It's a portal. It's a big secret. It's a portal. It can be used anyway. If you see the right way, your physical eyes, it's like a magic eye, and you can see depth. Now all of a sudden depth pops out. There's these polygons, etc. These platonic solids. So the idea is the soul doesn't need to do that. Just like if you go into your dream and you're awake and you make a landscape and music and such, it's like the easiest thing. You can just come up with poetry and whatever. It's like, because it's pure at that point. There's no filtration system. There's no ego mind acting as the pseudo biocomputer, lensing system for this reality, and it's straight to the information or the knowledge at that point. Really, there's no informational overlay. It's just pure knowledge, and you can do whatever. You can create purely from the unconscious mind, because you're actually in your unconscious mind in that state. But the idea is that the soul, or the out of body aspect of the mind, to see that, it doesn't see the flat surface, it sees a tunnel. It sees each successive layer of those platonic solids until it's a universe into itself. So the soul literally will go into it thinking that's the way out, especially if you put funny lights and crazy colors there, and it becomes a false light trap. And so that's the whole point. This New Age is like, yeah, it's awesome, blah, blah, blah. And maybe for the sake of duality, it's the anti-New Age, which is possibly just as bad. But the idea is the New Age now is that, no, that's a trick. And that's what we were told, though. And I've seen that it is part of the trick, that vortexes can emit from it and become activated by your observation of it, and this entrains one's consciousness. It's a supercomputer system built into the surface of reality itself, just like how certain symbols, certain logos act as maps. Basically, just think of any ritual, or maybe don't think of one, but the idea is that these symbols drawn on the floor, or in on the walls, or in clothing, or languages and lettering, they're supercomputers, or supercomputers. They're programs. And when your mind combines with it, the symbol, you are activating it, because now your mind is a computer, and your mind has an imprint of the symbol. So now the symbol becomes a part of your mind, which is a computer. If they map it out the right way, it becomes a program that infects the mind and plugs into your reality and begins to emit. And so, some of these like satanic symbolisms or something like that, and that's just a term because you can find stuff where they're hiding the truth in the dark because they don't want people to see it, or they're being nice guys and shielding the truth against a background of darkness and vulgarity, so that the dumbasses that look for the truth in that get sucked into the dark, which is still crazy, but at least they're not telling them directly. But the idea is
that let me ask a question that'll help illustrate that. Perhaps in my 20s, I wanted to understand better how my thoughts, beliefs, and emotions were affecting my energetic body. So I went and did a Kirlian photography, this method. So I took a photograph of my thumb. It's a thumbprint on a electrostatic plate with film. So it's going to record the energy signature around that object, which is in a little tiny dark bag, right? Thumbprint. So I thought, there's no point doing this once, but it could be extremely illustrative if I did it twice. So the first time I put my hand in the bag, I said to myself, you dumb shithead, you dumb shithead. I had a negative vibration. Took the picture, took my hand out, I shook, and then I did my, refocused my mind and did this chanted Satnam 3 times, true identity, and then took the other picture. So 15 seconds maybe elapsed. The first picture, red, orange, jaggedy, restricted. The second image, bright white, bluish purple, shooting way, way far out, almost uniformly, probably 99%. There was one little teeny tiny red bump in there somewhere circling the energy. So now what did that tell me? It told me that, my vibrational state can be captured in at least this one physical methodology, and that there's a difference. There's a really big difference depending on, energetically what's going on with me. Do you have, how else can we reliably now map that kind of thing in a way that helps us accelerate the process or support the process, minimize the birthing pains? If you think of this like, okay, we're kind of birthing consciousness, if you will. So how can we do this without having a bloody, horrible, screaming, pain-filled birth trauma as is depicted in the media constantly? Instead, if we had a really beautiful, mellow home birth, where the baby, dad catches the baby or whatever, like it's just all really, it's more orgasmic energetically than painful. So I think that's what we're trying to do together, is to minimize the birth pain. Does that make sense? And how can we use technology that's not, that is insulating us from the AI infected trap type stuff? That's my question. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but the answer probably won't. So I'll get back to the sacred geometry in a second. But the gist of that is the Metatronic grid that's that vortex system. But it actually ties in. Everything always ties in. When everything ties in, you're seeing what's really there. So that they're with the sacred geometry, the Metatronic grid, which is basically connected to the Fibonacci. When you see a Mandelbrot or Fibonacci zoom sequence, where in order to see the next extension, the next layer of the patterning, the previous view, if everything is to remain proportional, or the previous iteration has to go out of view, it goes off screen. Or if you're zooming out instead of zooming in, the previous iteration goes into the center, and eventually they go into a point, and the information that is used to define them becomes nullified, meaning it's dissolved, it's gone. So what you see is the universe. And so if we use that number sequence, which is the same as saying the previous numbers of the Fibonacci have to eat each other in order to create the next one, if that's our mind, then it means we're jumping from timeline to timeline and forgetting each place that we were at before, or our ego is just simply disconnected from it. And so I can go greater into depth for that, but that's the gist of it. That because it zooms off the screen, it's a fractal repeating pattern that leaves room for error and forgetfulness. That if our soul or our mind is, it operates like a fractal repeating pattern, and it's that pattern, there's no way to retain yourself. However, the workaround that some of these groups found, which in theory and in official disclosure, only those who have already done it are required to do it, because now we have the documents to prove that they had to clone themselves and put their consciousness into a chip and realize that in between every few iterations of what we call day and night and hour and moment, interdimensional beings come down and restitch everyone's memory together because they're running this show like a human factory farm. And but because we're running these inorganic time, cycles, you can't see it unless you literally die while you're awake. But at that point, the show's over anyway, so what does it matter? You're free, but you also can't help anyone. Unless you get that glitch effect where somebody, leaves their body and comes back And usually these are like gurus or you know, saints or something like that. It's not every day. And it's just weird, you know, weird stuff. But the idea is that it doesn't mean that everyone's going to get chipped and that's how we're going to beat the system. There are some theories that that's how disclosure is going to work. But technically, the chip is big, or the old one. It's like the size of a grain of rice. They can make computer chips that are microscopic now. They have technology to make computer chips that are gaseous. If everyone wanted to be, if they wanted to chip everybody, they wouldn't have to ask for permission. It would be done. So, you know, put that in perspective for people who are nervous about, you know, what I'm saying. Which there are a lot of people, because it's like, guess what, their ego is like, oh, there's secret, you know, groups, these occultic, powerful groups that have thousands of years of technology. I'm going to outsmart them by making fun of this disclosure on the internet, and not me personally, but just being like, you know, yeah, they're doing that. Well, guess what? Screw them. Wow, that's your method. That's your anti-Illuminati mad scientist protectionist. Screw that. It works if you really do it in that sense. Basically, open your heart up to helping the world, which is you want to say screw that. Love everyone. You did it. You fucking screwed them. If you know somebody's trying to screw them and they still have hate in their heart, they are them. Okay, that's how it works. That's how assimilation works. They implant themselves into people's energy systems and live within their aura and transplant themselves from DNA to DNA, system to system, like parasites, because they don't have bodies anymore. But as I was saying, those original operatives that put their consciousness through this system had a homegrown AI system tell them, feed them back the information that we're normally blacked out from through what is called a blank slate technology or whatever it is. And it's weird when we're not paying attention. The background view, the information behind us degrades into what looks like ones and zeros. It turns into a wireframe reality. Non-souled beings apparently are everywhere, and if one of them is in your vicinity, every souled being pumps out reality waves, whatever you want to call it. If someone is, say, a non-souled being, and you're at an office or something, and you have the chip and the AI monitoring you from external, internal, and you go back later and replay what you were seeing, that was, or in the vicinity, as well as something watching outside, because the idea is the universe sees the soul and goes, I got to make sure this looks right. Makes sense. You have a computer system watch that can see on the level of a person, but basically there are these systems that it basically skips. It's non-detected. Basically, it watches from an alternate dimension. It's non-detected by this control system, whatever is monitoring this grid, okay, that projection system. It doesn't view that as a viewing self. And apparently, say there's a guy in the mailroom or something like that, and it's a non-souled being, a background person. Eventually he turns into a stick figure, and the pieces of mail turn into these wireframe see-through cubes, and everything just breaks down into a digital holographic like projection system. Apparently that's going on 24/7. That is, it's being rendered into this reality. And they had to use these systems, and so then as well, these systems can track a person through a death experience, and an individual can be revived. And it's confusing for the individual to remember, but they don't have to know, because if the system is watching them and the memory of the consciousness goes into the soul, which is outside of the body in the electromagnetic field of the blood, but not the organs themselves, but it is separate, then the system can read from the soul, and you can literally pull it up on a monitor and see them passing through these interdimensional portals. And not Jupiter ascending, but there's one, I don't know, it was the Asian lady, and I can't remember what it was, and there's basically a big clone factory. A lot of times that's what we see. That it's like a system, a bug thing comes, puts out a proboscis, and I think it's proboscis, and it sucks the soul energy up, it spirals up, and it retracts and beams off, usually goes in the direction of the moon, and implants it into a series of soul chamber systems to go one after another. There's like 3 or 4 systems in layers, and it denatures the soul, uses high intensity discharge radiation to maximize the polarity of it's like a mandala effect looking thing, and it washes it all away until it's bright white like a baby, and it gets inserted back into a body. We didn't know that until the chips could be used and the computers could read from the chip, and these are soul stones, soul chips that can measure information both from the body as well as where the soul goes when it's out of the body. meaning it's like a relay system. So that was how technology was used to figure this out. The weird part, the bad part, what do you want to call it? Okay, then the parasites figured out that we figured that out and began to pile on information to stop that and create new layers that couldn't be figured out, which is why we're in the situation we're in now, where it's just the decision to tell people what's going on. And it's weird because only those who already knew something was up are going to see what I've said, okay, whether here or in other places, and go, I knew something was going on. So I'm not telling anyone. Those who don't know are going to look at this and go, yeah, right, all right, whatever. The system's not going to know I did anything. It's just going to be like, it's just some guy. He's using words. Everybody's using words. That's what they do, human things. Another day in the factory farm. So it's set up so that we got the corners rounded. It's a good system. No one's going to even know what happened as far as the people who aren't supposed to. And so now the technology that is more or less probably going to be used is already being used. It's the inversion. Right now we have Gwen towers and scalar systems which literally are pulsing out kill commands into everybody's brain. Be tired and hate life commands coming out of the woodwork, from the monitors to the telephone wires to the Gwen towers. It's being used. It's bouncing off of people's systems. Kirlian, okay, well, that's showing energy. So it's hitting those fields and trying to degrade it, like the Dr. Emoto's frozen, ice crystals, and the negative versions, the degraded versions. It's the same thing. There's some charts which show like every emotion of the body and then like a drawing of the aura. Like that was one of the I've seen it in the bases. And, I've seen that, and then I've seen, like, okay, everybody's activated, system's on, and it's like you can see each other's systems. And it's like the guy that's mad is, like, jagged and whatnot, and it literally bites into yours. You can feel it. It's literally like it's burning, like, get away. And then the guy who's the master of his field, or there's, like, a word for it, it's like an automatic submission to that person's energy, because whatever they feel, everybody feels. It's like they're a beacon for the group, which is just natural. But it also means that the inversion of that, which everything that is can be inverted, is that if somebody's a vampire and they're a master vampire, then they're sucking everybody's energy. You can do both. And so right now, all that technology is basically vampire tech. It's all feeding off everybody. It's being inverted. The inverted tech is being inverted, meaning reverted, so it's being righted. That's going to happen. Nobody's going to have any say in that. There are apparently systems that work through consent, as far as if people want to use basically these, their vibrational state energy bodies or energy body surgery devices. And it's just called surgery. It's basically because you have that field. Well, if you hit the portion of that field in just the right way, in the way that the person's mind relates to their body, you can fix that jagged edge aspect of the field. It will improve. Again, you don't want to, the whole thing is a doctor cuts, stitches, and, like sutures stuff back together. It fixes things. A doctor fixes things. Doctor doesn't heal. So none of this can be mechanical or doctoring. If it's healing, then it has to be on an organic level where it's enabling the person to utilize the ability to see their own energy and fix it. Oftentimes, it takes their energy and beams it back to them, just like the soul trap technology, only a guy's managing it and going up too much, pull back some. All right, a little bit more. You see that? You have to stop doing that. And you can literally feel where your emotions, you have this proportion, you have this blueprint, this posture of how you're sitting in your mind, which is not really your head, but your chest. And it's like this upper lower thing. And you see, I was lopsided. I was looking like my foot was up here, like my energy body foot. And you can see how it's entangled. There's etheric implants, there's etheric attachments, there's entity attachments, which are literally like these. They're conscious, but they're artificial. They're synthetically aware, and they're interdimensional organs. They're the parasites, and they burrow into that energy field. Wherever there's a weak spot, they go in there, because then they can sit there, and your energy is not going to put them out, and they can sip off of the axis bio emissions that come out. All those have to be removed, and there's technology to do it. The whole point is a lot of people freak the F out when they're faced with any of this. I kind of did just a little bit. but really not, because I kind of play with the ideas. And then there's the idea of assimilation and so on and so forth. If there's assimilation, they're not going to be like, hey, do you want to come get assimilated? When did that occur? The world's in shit. When did they ask us if we're if we give permission for all the wars, for the pollution, to literally go outside, and if I get, rained on the right way, or if I go by the wrong lake, I'm going to get irradiated. I'm going to be irradiated and poisoned. When did I ask for that? No, they don't need consent to do all the shit that's being done. That's the whole point. They're the dark ones. They do need consent for certain aspects as far as what we permit. It's kind of, I don't know. I don't want to get into that. But
do we have the capacity to say no and have that be an overwhelmingly...
If we commit to not interacting on the frequency of basically war, for instance, I think a good way to say it is that on a collective level, maybe a good way to say it is that war is waged against the species of the civilization. On the individual level, we're always given the opportunity to avoid involving ourselves with that. If we do involve ourselves with that, there is a kind of, so the consent thing is kind of weird, but there is a kind of a multi-tiered layer of involvement as far as, say, there's a free-for-all of what can be done, and the whole species is at war. We're getting dumped with these chemicals and toxins and poisons, and then there's a layer of consent or autonomy where people chose to buy it or something like that. And there's an interplay where it's part of the environment or part of something we introduce into our lives. And then, say, somebody goes and integrates a part of the destruction into their life, and they're getting in fights or something, or they're basically disrespecting somebody, harming somebody else. That enables the same energy to be put back upon themselves. So now there's a second tier to where they're being involved in this system, and it continues like that until there are layers. But it really doesn't make sense, because then you look at the phenomena of gang stalking, and that seems to be a contrived version of the same thing, which is basically that people who are not involved in supporting certain aspects of this are considered enemies of the state, and then it is used to warrant targeting. Okay, but then there's aspects where that's just an AI system. That's all it is. It's an unconscious synthetic organism that was built by these groups and has been hanging around for thousands of years, and it runs the factory, the human factory. Then the other version is that if certain systems or groups do that, they pull the energy parasitically from those people. So rather than, basically, it's like and I'm telling you, it's messed up. So do they need consent to stop that vampire organism from pulling energy by themselves, doing what would already be done, but taking the energy into the human race and essentially sacrificing a portion of what would already be lost, but is going to go to the dark organism that feeds on humanity, or becoming the darkness themselves, in essence, to basically sacrifice the targeted as well as themselves if they end up in a way degrading, in some way, shape, or form from that process. In that view, consent is completely out the window, but it's also, it's almost like stereotypically psychopathic or sociopathic, to the point where it's like, sacrifices must be made in order to save the whole, and somebody has to make that decision, or it's going to happen anyway. And I'm not really going to go there, but that's the type of stuff that goes on. And so the idea is, it's all that wrapped up in a whole big jumble as far as who's going to have the opportunity to say, oh, technology, that could help? Sure, sign me up. And to the point where it's already being applied because this or that, or like the worst of the worst is already happening. It's already, because that's the other aspect, that we're all under Gwen Tower radiation, which is literally saying, go F yourself and turn inside out. It's saying the opposite of whatever people feel, and it is intelligently feeding back. So if somebody wakes up to it and is like, what is that signal? It feels that reverberation and goes, there's a target, increase the targeting of that sector, of that area. And in that way, consciousness going up and down and is holding everybody down. again, why that could be happening for a reason that we, you know, don't really know. There are explanations which are like mind-bogglingly sadistic, and at the same time, if they're true, is worse than just doing it for the hell of doing it. That, you know, they're trying to like fend off from an invader from another system that would be using it anyway. They're managing the darkness by becoming it. And so the idea is that but the other aspect is that there's assimilation tech, but it can't work unless the person accepts, and this isn't direct through like, yeah, I sign on a consent. It makes energy waves that are akin to being angry. If a person feels anger, basically if that outside thing goes into the assemblage point of the heart, okay, if you let anger into your heart, like the scriptures or you know what say, it becomes part of their whole system. Their whole system becomes infected, just like the computer system. It's like the center. What's in the center, then it emanates outward. So if people accept that, it's not a consent thing. It's like an unconscious thing. If they're not completely resistant to infection or parasitic energy, mental behavior, then the assimilation happens, and it's already happened for a lot of people. Like the whole chipping zombie apocalypse, like we're in the midst of it. If it you know, is to go to a next phase, then they just press the button. But everyone's already loaded. Okay, everyone's already loaded and primed and ready to go. That's the whole point. So and all it is, again, isn't zombies and like running off from building tops. It's just people being degraded spiritually, mentally, being parasitic, and not realizing it, not seeing themselves. That's assimilation. That, and then in that idea, it's as simple and straightforward that it's not a big secret group doing something. It's some type of tainting of the genome, which resulted in the brain's capacity. Wow, there's probably another event. There was a guy running from the cops earlier, and there's cops going late at night. I don't know what's going on. It's like a replay of like, Groundhog Day.
Something happening right now that you're keeping an eye on?
Yeah, apparently. I went through it earlier today and rode out on my bike to see what it was, and it was random, like episode of Cops. But the idea is that you know, even that interjecting into the situation becomes a part of the event or the conversation. But the idea is like that's assimilation. If you could see assimilation, it's like, damn, I got assimilated the other day. Oh shit. Okay, it's a really crappy computer system that can also create universes and map out human genomes. If people get assimilated, the whole point is that they don't even know it. That's how powerful it is. It replicates their consciousness, inserts itself into their DNA, and then acts like it's them, and they don't even know. Meaning their brain is reconfigured, and their soul eventually diminishes, but their consciousness, it looks like the same thing. It becomes them, and there's no outward appearance. And in that sense, unless you know what to look for, it's not the same. So this is where, or it is the same. This is where that goes into, as far as, I kind of went off track there, especially with the consent thing, but that is the basic paradox, or at least the formalcy, the confusion behind all of that. But you're as far as what you acknowledge, you do have control over. But again, it gets weird as far as, like, for instance, saying, okay, I don't consent to chemtrails and things like that. Well, the majority of us do. That's not targeting one person, therefore we're screwed by all the people that do consent. You see, it's like a interplay. And everybody would have to stand up and say, we don't consent. Then they'd be forced to stop if they're actually using consent, which I'm pretty sure they are. But just for, you know, specific ways. And so, for instance, which is, again, it's weird because it's like it's contradictory in that sense. But, you know, if you see both the angles that it is happening, but then in a certain way, basically personally, your consent applies. For is seemingly happening to the masses, like it's still consent, but it's just like the consent that is applied to everyone goes against personal consent, because we can't dictate for the whole of the population, which is like I don't know, like a sham, because then we'd have to go into the mountains and get away from every bit of technology in order to avoid what is being thrust upon the population. But it's also because, in that sense, the majority is consenting, or at least is they're doing it to themselves by not realizing that what's going on, it's not being acknowledged. bunch of contradictions there, but that'll be fun to look at later.
So that there's an absence of.
For 1 second, I'm going to leave this room open. My family is calling me in for dinner. I'm going to leave my headset on and mute, and do what you will, and we'll talk about the book through messaging. And Aug, thank you, and Blair, thank you. So continue.
Thank you, Bibi. Thank you.
My pleasure. I'll leave everything on.
All right. Thank you. I got a little confusing there, but
I follow you. So to me, it seems then that that awareness, generally speaking, or really self-awareness, because to catch oneself participating in that negative mind activity, right? So to be putting out attack thoughts really hurts me, right? So my self-awareness prevents that at some point, and is always really good for a laugh when I do it. So to have, attack thoughts towards others is it's kind of funny, because it's absurd. It'd be like you on your bicycle pedaling and braking at the same time, okay? And where are you going to go like that, okay? You have to apply the brakes when you need the brakes. You have to apply power to the pedals when you need power to the pedals. And maybe you do them both at the same time, but then you're trying to what? Stand still at the traffic light or something, not put your feet down. That's when you apply the brakes. But it feels to me like our programming has us, start jerking through life because of the brakes, applying power and applying the brakes at the same time. And it's funny, really. I mean, catching oneself doing this over and over and over and over again, maybe longer spaces between the times of doing it, but is that the goal? Is that what we're really trying to figure out here, is to notice and then what?
Well, we could say it's funny until we realize how long we've been doing it. And the memory starts to trickle in. And we have memories of thousands of years of the same thing happening over and over again. Part of that, memories are wiped. Half the time they're wiped to stop people from seeing the truth, because it will destroy them. It'll fracture their mind worse than before. So it's like kind of gets blown out of proportion or out of perspective. And the idea is, though, what happens if you were to brake and pedal, or even the car, and what happens to the brake pads, and what is produced by that? There's friction.
Heat.
There's energy produced. And so it's a standstill, and as well, just like the processing power that you override your system and create a background cloud computing for your mind to then achieve a goal that is basically extra dimensional in nature, that's part of how people's minds are being used. Equations are built into a persona or personality schema, and then those are inserted into society, and the synthesis, the reaction of how people eventually go through the processes and the routine of behavior and stopping, starting, and looping, that is the result of the equation that they use the people, like the cloud computing of the minds of thousands to millions of people to achieve, and would otherwise require a lot of computing power, which wouldn't even be potentially possible. And the weird thing is that some being did this for humanity as an experiment to hijack a cloud computing network, because it has some experiment that's trying to get done. And then the original, again, using that word, but the true purpose, and so here's even the difference with original and true, is that original meaning, now it's not happening because at first there's this, now it's this meaning. True meaning this is happening then. It's still happening now, but now there's this overlay of BS, which is also happening. But if it's true meaning, it's still happening, because it can't be. Once it's true, it's always true. It can't be anything else.
Mm.
The true being is that it's created as it's like a daydream it's having, and we're processing out the interactions of its previous day, and the experience of every being that ever lived is its imagination about what it did yesterday, and it's like just getting out a little bit of quirks about how it feels about certain things, and its journey of being a universe. And we're processing that out. We're synthesizing the emotion. We're processing its feelings to get to the next level so that it can mature as an adult, a fully grown universe, and become a multiverse. Um, but as I was saying, I'll try and wrap that part up, is that the angles and the frequencies are also what's different with the Metatronic system, that it's a different alignment of frequencies. You change the alignment and you end up with a different overall pattern because the core pattern is different from like a Vesica Pisces and versus a, I can't remember the word, like a trifecta, there's a different word for it. And you end up with a different pattern, which results in a different system that apparently is organic and equates to basically the Metatronic system. You map it all out and you end up with a grid that looks like Earth if you look at Earth from a right angle, meaning we're in this strange parallel of a certain number of degrees which are locked in, or consciousness is locked into, and it's like a Fibonacci false reality system. In that sense, every time the iterations go, everyone's memories get wiped. There's a reset. So what they did to combat that is do a reset halfway through. So now we have half as much time, but in a way twice, because now we had the reset, but we didn't get our memories wiped because those original, whoever that went into the bases to have their memories chipped and cloned. Well, when the whole society woke up again in the 1980s or whatever, they were all right. They had their memories because they're stored in an alternate dimension in a supercomputer system. So now they have, for the first time ever, a stretch of 30 years to go into these time dilation fields and map out everything as if it were from the beginning of time and prepare for the next reset that was to come, which never happened. So it's weird. Everything that we think is happening is not what we think it is. It's all part of a conspiracy of conspiracies. But the idea is that, so apparently it's all about angles and frequencies, and it's the same thing with the Kirlian code.
Yep, Kirlian.
Photography and the primarily the chart of the emissions from the body, and that there are, I think, 7 bodies, 7 vibrational emission spectrums. I think it's what is it? Etheric. I think etheric, maybe temporal, astral or emotional, lower mental, psychic, I think, and higher mental, and the soul field, which is more or less the primer field of our actual, the one that is required to make all the other ones work, and all the others would be akin to these overlays. And so, but those fields, when they're out of whack, it's like a wire that's not insulated properly, and there's a leaking out of energy, of bioetheric energy. It's like having holes in the aura, or basically an exposed live feed wire. And say you're an energy parasite, you're literally like a little floating orb that sucks on exposed wires and can feed the body off of that. Okay, well, that's how they feed off the people, having their auras or their energy in a low state. And if you can feel somebody from your convergence point having that effect, well, that's how the parasites feed. And so then all that has to be removed, and it's basically like a taser system for the energy field. And there are more complex and basically brutal versions of that involving the mind and the brain, which people aren't going to like, but is basically being applied already. People are basically being dumbed down, and it's going to happen one way or another. Either people are going to be strong enough to not feed parasites, or they're going to be too dumb to know the difference. And they're going to be impossible, incapacitated, basically. And maybe that's just a plan to dominate the world. But I'll just say, if that is the plan, then they're using these parasites to get there, and there's still a parasite problem, and it's destroying everything, and they're dominating at risk of destroying everything. and that's how crazy they are. Either that, or there's a parasite infection apart from what they're doing, or they did both, and they were like, "Shit, we tried to do one, and that turned into almost killing the world. So now we're trying to save it, but we're still trying to dominate by saving it. So it's like it's all just a free for all."
In our circles, meaning me and my family and friends, which is kind of insulated, and we're in some weird little bubble, but there's a huge movement. Like our daughter was born at home, not in a hospital, so we do home birth. We cook at home. I was a little late to this call because I was chopping kale and sweet potatoes with my kid, helping do this activity. And we spent years avoiding sugar and TV and screen time, and all these things to insulate us, and trying to eat actual real food is a major, we put a lot of time into actual real cooking, and I see a shift. There's more and more and more people who are caring about this kind of stuff, and it's so that imbibing or ingesting the parasitic stuff is the ratio. If we're working hard to eat real food, to grow food and eat it actually, and is there what percentage are we going to get? Are we being bombarded that way via the fake food system, or whatever you call it, the mass food system that's essentially killing us? How much of it is that versus just the air we breathe? If we're ingesting parasites, how much of it is through food and water versus just environmental and, the cell towers, etc.? Can you put a number on those two things? Does it make any difference to eat clean, so to speak?
Yes and no. I'm just going to say another one you probably never going to believe. And, there's a possibility, I'm a little tired now if I'm sounding slurred, but there's a possibility, if they gave me a number, then I could tell you a number. I could guess and give you a rough estimate. But there's a difference.
Sure, that's good enough. A guess is good enough.
Well,
I'm not going to hold you to it. It doesn't really matter what you say, but I'm curious because to me there's a tie there. It's kind of like there are two universes or something in front of me, because I see tremendous consciousness in some cases, and awareness and efforting to find the highest good, and then I see other people who are just struggling. It's just a real shit show, and a lot of pain and agony, and they're both out there. So I get that it's not a hard, fast number, but if it doesn't make any difference, that's, to me, that would be that's not a self-respecting. That really disempowers the human organism to think that it just doesn't matter, unless, I guess, if belief systems, if we could, you've got the person who lived a centenarian, they lived to be 100 years old, and what's their secret? Bourbon and cigarettes. That's their secret or something. I can't really see that working for me, but if it works for them, I'm okay with it. Is that the sense that you mean? Yes and no?
In a way, and there's a reason for that. For instance, for that, I can say, well, we talked about that. That was brought up in the bases, or the debriefings. More so, we don't really have time to talk about shit like that in the bases, but these are genetics. Some people basically have superhuman genetics, and it's not because they were experimented on. It's because they're literally just hard to kill, and you can poison the shit out of them or put them through hell, and they'll get stronger as a result of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting species. It's diverse, and it's diverse for a variety of reasons. It's a purple sunset. Bibi's video. And
Yeah,
so
that's beautiful.
the other aspect I can only bounce around on, which is what we think is happening is not really what's happening. Either that or it's all lies, but it's all already lies. So either it's all lies and they just sprinkled some more lies on top, or what we think is happening is the cover. The conspiracy is the cover for the real reason. And if we knew the real reason, we'd won, poop our pants, because it's like, oh, so then this is to defend against something else, which is way worse than rich old white guys poisoning people for power. Or it's at least way more impressionable, if you ask me. What if that was what was being used to stop people from dissolving, if you will? That stress, and I'm bouncing around the bush far here, but stress, that's not even a term, bouncing around, but technically it is. But you can bend certain terms to make them still work and not actually use the same like idiom, but metaphor.
Yeah.
But stress can be used to induce a state of higher awareness and to initiate, for instance, someone's immune system and jumpstart a restoration of health. And so something like that might be happening here, which is also why we get mixed results. There's some people who are like, it's this, or it's not that, it's just the mind, or it's none of this, it's genetics, and it's like whether you got lucky or not. And honestly, it's all of those. It's usually everything that's done is done so carefully that there's plausible deniability from every angle. Meaning that everyone can BS and say this is what it really is, and technically they're all right. But they're not going to know that because they're all going to blame each other for being wrong. And meanwhile, if they just work together, they'd figure out the truth. But the other aspect is that there's radiation, there's mineral dust, there's pollution, there's inorganic, non-bioavailable minerals disguised as vitamins, heavy metals. There's so much. There's a host of things going on.
Yeah.
Etc. I touched on this in the with Ghislaine with I think who was it? I think it was the Florecer da Consciencia, which is one of the Brazilian radios that I've done a couple episodes with you, actually, just one last night with Felicia and Ghislaine, Antonio, Eileen. But
I listened to one of those. It was fascinating to hear the Portuguese language translation, and it really slowed you down, which is not a bad thing, you know. It was very, very interesting to listen to it that way. I don't speak Portuguese, so.
Yeah, it's going to hit on various angles just to have the concept, which is weird. It ties back into having these devices contribute to one's awareness that if you have all these angles of this illusory realm in the same room, eventually the person wakes up and goes, oh my gosh, we've been here forever battling this situation that just keeps going back and forth. Like once you get enough of it all in front of a person, they wake up, their energy clicks on, which again is very stressful. The idea is, I thought even on the fluoride being possibly, so there's one explanation that the fluoride is to protect people from something that would otherwise use that system. For instance, we just talked about it. The pineal gland could be a trap. Oh, they're shutting off everybody's pineal gland. They're evil. All right, well, what's the point? I mean, what if it's a trap and then they're stopping people from getting absorbed into this assimilation system?
Using fluoride, perhaps.
Using poison.
Yeah.
So, and that's the trade-off that some people are going to develop bone disorders and tooth disorders and so on and so forth. But it's either that or the species turns into organic reptoids by an ancient AI that devised a plan to literally chemically indoctrinate people and reorganize, reconfigure their form into a light trap body prism system for a soul. Very strange. It's old stuff, demiurge, etc.
Yeah. So I see you yawning a little bit. I had a nap today in preparation for this, so I'm doing okay. But I want to. Hi, Bibi. Thanks for coming back.
Yeah, that's exactly. I was listening to Aug yawn, and
Yeah.
I can't help it. I am in the role of mother in many aspects in my orbit, and I come here playing the role of mother, and I'm saying that it's time
Yay.
to say good night and
Good night, Irene.
say so much wonderful information. Really, thank you so much. Just such a pleasure to finally meet you as well. And we'll talk about the book. We will.
Okay, yeah. Thank you for the help for that. That's all I can say. I'm in a weird situation with like touching what I'm doing in this. I can talk for hours and I can write for hours, but to actually go back and be like, oh shit, I've been saying this to the public. It's a weird feeling. I haven't really mastered the feedback loop of that yet because it honestly is I'm saving it up because when that has to happen and I have to fully embrace that system I told you was going to activate a little bit higher.
I understand as much as I can with what you just said. Yeah, I hear you. Well,
change begets more change. And
we'll take our cue from you. This is your material, and it's the role that you have chosen to play that is happening. So, what you say will go. And on that note, be well, both of you. And I have much to float around in.
Yeah. Yeah. There's only a little bit more that we could have talked about, at least for where that was going. It leaves more to be said another time. I wish it were as easy as saying goodbye and going to sleep and lying down. I'll shower and lie down, and then my brain will give me another 3 hours, which isn't necessarily a bad thing or beyond choice, but it's definitely, I don't know, it's a little bit extra. So yeah, we'll talk again. I hope this was enjoyable. I always feel like I just ramble. I know I rambled a lot in the beginning and the end, and really the middle too. But
it was enjoyable, useful, and very coherent information from my experience.
Me too. Yes, thank you so much.
And I don't want to like rag on people, but it means something important coming from, two people that are here with me now versus like a bunch of people on the internet that are just like, oh, this is crazy, it's awesome, it's cool, do more. It's like, I appreciate that as well, but I really can't take it too seriously because I could sit there and be like, oh, I jumped off a building the other day and broke my legs and smoked a blunt. They'd be like, whoa, awesome. But the strive for coherence and meaning is pronounced and legitimate, at least in this situation. So thank you.
Thank you for trusting yourself to do it, to speak without, and having it be okay that it comes out the way that it comes out. That is an act of faith, and I appreciate that you're doing it in that spirit.
And you show others as well when you do that. You exhibit behavior that I think is worthy of emulating. So, on that note, I'm going to say farewell, and soon we'll chat again. I love the energy. It's very helpful.
Awesome. Thank you both.
I will say I did have help for that, so I can't say it's like all me. Yeah, and save the recording too. I might want to.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it's going to be pretty cool. All right, we'll talk soon, guys.